Recently, China has been aggressively pursuing ownership of U.S. farmland, raising security concerns here at home as to just what are they up to. We'll talk about that. Plus, President Xi Jinping resurfacing after disappearing from public view for several weeks. What was going on there? And the tariffs. China calls it bullying by President Trump. And joining me to break it all down is host of CBN's Global Lane, Gary Lane. Hello, Gary. How's it going?
Hi, Dan. Good to be with you on this Friday.
Yeah, let's get right into it here. China, a lot going on with China, and at CBN, we're always keeping an eye on what they're doing. I mean, I would say it's probably safe to say, Gary, that they're our top geopolitical foe at this point. And would you say that's accurate?
I would say it's accurate because they have the second largest economy in the world.
Yeah. And they're clearly up to stuff with the U.S. farmland, which we're going to talk about here in a minute, what the latest is there. But let's talk about this disappearance by Xi Jinping. He just kind of vanished for a little while, and now he's back. So what happened here? What's going on?
Well, look, many of us would wonder, was he on vacation? Where did Xi go? No one saw Xi. And so there were wondering, people around the world, and especially even in China, where is their supreme leader? And I think the greatest concern, Dan, the biggest concern came when he didn't show up for the BRICS summit. That's the International Summit of Developing Economies in Brazil. He was missing from that. That's the first time he's ever missed that summit. Generally, China loves to lead that summit of developing nations, and he wasn't there. He missed it. So where was he? Suddenly this week, I think it was on Tuesday, Xi appears. Tuesday or Wednesday, suddenly he's in public and they see him again. This is a weakened leader, and we can talk about that as well.
I mean, are there any health issues at play here? I mean, I remember a similar situation a few years ago in North Korea with the president there just was gone and everyone just assumed that he was dead. And that whole situation was odd. Could it be something like that? Or, I mean, what are the likeliest scenarios here?
Well, it could have been, but as you know, Dan, the Chinese Communist Party is not very forthright.
No.
They're not very open and honest about what's going on in their country. We found that out through the COVID crisis. But we don't know for certain. If you look at some of the video, he looked fine, like he's walking well, and maybe he had some surgery or something, and it took 3 weeks to recover from that. Why would he not go to the BRICS summit? But we do know, and I talked to Gordon Chang this week for the Global Lane, that he has been weakened, not only by the military, but also by the Politburo. And we can talk about that if you want to know more about that.
Yeah, we'll dive into that in a second here. I just wanted to say hey to the people in the chat here. We already got several hundred of you on there. Make sure you hit like, by the way, in the chat. And if you have a question for Gary, I mean, Gary has been reporting internationally for decades now and just has such a wealth of knowledge. So if you have any questions, we're talking about China today. But if you have any questions for Gary, just put question in the chat there in caps, and I'll try to monitor that as we're going on here. Sometimes that's a little tricky to do, but appreciate you being here in the chat. Make sure you hit that like button because that'll help it, hit algorithms. Everyone's got to deal with algorithms these days, Gary, and that's all super fun. But that helps when you do that. So go ahead and hit that like button in here because I can see 600 plus on there. Oh yeah, there we go. Now we went from about 90 to 130 in just a couple seconds. There you go. And I always love seeing where people are watching from, Gary. This is my favorite thing about CBN probably is the global audience. You're on the global lane already. Greetings from India. Greetings from Saudi Arabia.
Wow.
And then Michigan. So I mean, right in the same neighborhood there.
Did you say Michigan?
Yeah, somebody, let's see here. Somebody from Zeeland, Michigan. I don't know. I've never heard of Zeeland, Michigan, but so we've got Michigan, but India and Saudi Arabia. I don't know that I've seen someone from Saudi Arabia yet. So that's an interesting one. So Australia, Germany, New Zealand. I mean, look at this. This is incredible. I love it. And then Florida and Toledo. So roll call. I love it. I love a good roll call. So, all right, let's keep going here, Gary. So tell me more about this summit and what you were thinking there.
Well, what I was thinking here is on June 30th, you had a Politburo meeting, And in that meeting, they granted more power to what you call the central commissions. So it's taking power away, in effect, from Xi Jinping and giving it to these central commissions and giving them more authority to govern. In addition to that, the military in recent months has been involved in lessening Xi Jinping's influence and his power, as stated in the People's Liberation Army Daily. That is a propaganda media organ of the PLA. And in that, it basically is a slap in the face to Xi Jinping. They were talking about his authority being lessened in that. That organ is something that's very important and wide read by the military. It basically, if Xi Jinping was in control, there wouldn't be that kind of slap in the face to him in what they're doing. And what the military has been doing is they've been removing pro-generals and pro-military people from the military, people that are pro-Xi Jinping. And several years ago, Xi had been involved in purging the military of corrupt generals. He said it was his anti-corruption campaign. But in effect, really, it was trying to get rid of those who opposed him, consolidating his power. Well, now the reverse is happening. We're seeing some of his anti-general or people who are anti-Xi Jinping in the military, the generals, are now claiming more power for themselves and kind of minimizing the power of Xi Jinping.
Well,
don't get me wrong, Dan, he's still in control. He's still
that's
in
what
power.
I was going to say.
It's just less power than he's had.
That's what I was going to say. If there is a movement afoot here in China to potentially want to remove, because this is a communist country, right? So it's not like, well, we'll wait to the next election and we'll just vote for someone else. It doesn't happen that way. So are we seeing sort of maybe the beginning of some sort of coup attempt or something like that? I mean, I think even in communist China, I mean, you would know better than I, but I mean, I would assume that kind of a thing in China is probably even pretty rare. So are we seeing that, do you think, or is this just sort of political maneuvering?
I think it's political maneuvering. I don't think you're going to see him leave power anytime soon. He certainly won't. Gordon Chang told me he's not going to voluntarily leave power.
No. Yeah.
But I don't see him leaving power. He may have reduced influence. He is weakened at this point, not as strong as he was at one point. And I think there are a number of reasons for that. Number one, his anti-corruption, what he called anti-corruption campaign. And Chang told me, he said, look, just about every leader, every general, every admiral in the military in China is corrupt. So you'd have to get rid of all of them if it was a true anti-corruption campaign, but it was more Xi Jinping trying to control the military and have more influence over the military. But now that's reversed because in the PLA Daily, as I had mentioned, they had talked about collective leadership. And he is the supreme leader, but when the military says we need collective leadership, that's a red flag. And that is a slap in the face to Xi Jinping. Now, what else? You say, well, could we see him removed from power? He is in his third term now. That's unprecedented. They have never had a leader who's been elected by the Communist Party to a third term. And not only is he the president of China, he's also the general secretary of the party. So he has a dual role there. Some say he has a third role, but he definitely has his most important is a dual role. I guess as a supreme commander of the military would be the third one. But with less power, less influence, he may eventually become just a figurehead. But right now, he still has some control, a weakened Xi Jinping, but he's still in control of China.
All right, and let's talk about the things that China is focused on right now. And over the past several years now, China, that is, has been sort of ramping up their efforts at targeting ownership of U.S. farmland, which is interesting because every time I see a farm around me, it's like it ends up getting sold to a developer, and then people are building houses and McMansions and stuff on these farms, and it always makes me sad to see a farm essentially give up and just cash in. But which I understand, by the way, if you're a farmer and you get that offer, I don't blame you. But at the same time, with China doing this now and buying up these farms, there's an update on this as well. But they've been pursuing this, Gary, for years now. So, is there something afoot here with why they're doing this? And B, what's the update on that ownership and their continued pursuit of it?
Well, first the update. I think last year they actually dropped in their ownership. They're down below, I think, 300,000, below 300,000 acres of U.S. farmland. And a lot of that is owned by the Smithfield Company, by the way, which is now here in Virginia. Smithfield hams and bacon and pork, right? That is a Chinese company now. So a lot of that has to do with Smithfield, other companies, Chinese companies. But the concern I think that a lot of our politicians in Washington have is not only the farmland, but a lot of this land that's being purchased is right next to military bases.
Mm.
So what's up with that? Are they setting up monitoring facilities where they can spy on the U.S. military? That shouldn't be allowed, should it? I mean, we don't. China doesn't allow us to do that. We can't buy land near their military bases. Matter of fact, Gordon Chang pointed out Americans cannot own any land in China. So he says, why are we allowing them to own property in the United States? In addition to that, we've seen some of this farmland, even those that the land that is not by the military bases, some of it has been used for nefarious purposes. There have been marijuana farms where Chinese nationals have been busted growing marijuana illegally. And we just saw one the other day in California. I don't know if those were Chinese nationals. I don't think they were. But there was one busted just yesterday, I think, or the day before in California. But Chinese nationals have been busted for having nefarious marijuana farms, growing cannabis illegally in the United States and probably trafficking that. So there is an effort underfoot. Secretary of Agriculture Brooke Rollins this week unveiled a new national act that she is hoping Congress will deal with to minimize or at least limit the ownership of American property by foreign nationals. Now, Dan, really, the Chinese only own about 1% of the agricultural land in the U.S. But I think the concern is for the future because they're starting to buy it up. And right now, believe it or not, probably 30 to maybe 1/3, 30% to maybe 1/3 of the land, agriculture and non-agricultural land in the U.S. that is owned by foreign nationals is owned by Canadians. Canada is the largest owner of foreign land, foreign owner of land in the United States, believe it or not, our neighbor to the north.
Yeah, I mean, it's all really interesting because, I mean, I don't think anybody here in America trusts China as far as we can throw them. And I mean, we all saw the Chinese spy balloon incident from a couple of years ago. And so clearly, you always have to, and then even with TikTok, what are they doing with this data? What technology do they have? You talked about the strategic locations of these land purchases. They also have been buying up different properties and mineral rights to places like we talked about. I think one of the times, Gary, we were talking about, I believe it was in Africa, aggressively pursuing the natural resources there. What do you think is kind of the big strategy here for China? I mean, obviously we're not going to let them buy. All of a sudden, we're not going to turn around and say, "Oh no, China owns 90% of American, farmland and land, and what do we do now? They're just going to stop the food production and everything else." I don't think that's going to happen. But what is their goal?
Well, their goal is money. They want to make money, and one way they make money is by stealing intellectual property. They do that. Certainly, it is for companies like Smithfield to make money. And I don't know if you remember, Dan, Smithfield, during the COVID crisis, it was hard to get pork products here in the U.S. because they were shipping all their pork products to China. That was the priority, was to ship it to China. So it was more difficult to get it. You could still get it in the U.S., but it was a little more difficult to get it. So it really is money and intellectual property. Of course, spying, what is that all about? What secrets do they get when they spy? They're getting copyrighted and secret information, right? They're getting from the military information so they can build better drones and better aircraft carriers and better aircraft. The other property that they're stealing, they use that to make money. They want to have the edge on the international market. But they've got economic problems right now in China. Gordon Chang will tell you about that. And Xi Jinping, part of his weakening of his influence has to do with the fact that the economy isn't where it should be. And you've got this whole tariff situation with Donald Trump in the United States. He was doing very well in 2017, 2018, 2019, and then COVID hit, and then he had to deal with that. And then the post-COVID hasn't been good for their economy. I think they've learned some lessons on their shutdown and the way they handled COVID. And so he's in a difficult position right now. China is hurting a bit economically, so they're going to do what they can to make money and to even with these tariffs. One thing that Gordon Chang pointed out with the tariffs is, look, in mid-May they agreed to export rare earth metals to the United States. These minerals that we need, 70% of the rare earths we get from China. And they agreed, they reached a deal with Trump on that, but then they've never delivered on it. They haven't sent them here. So I guess today or this week we've seen the opening of a rare earth mineral mine in Wyoming, the first one in 70 years in the United States. But we are very dependent on China for that. They haven't lived up to that deal. Gordon Chang said, even if we work a final agreement, a trade agreement on tariffs and trade with China, that doesn't mean they're going to abide by it. And he said they haven't lived up to any of their commitments since they joined the World Trade Organization about 5 years ago.
It's a kind of a weird situation with China, Gary, because I mean, talk about just their structure. Because I mean, it's a communist nation, but they try to sort of have this hybrid of a market, but within communism. So how does that all work?
Well, it works if you want to do a business with China and let's say you want to have a factory or put some business into China, the Chinese Communist Party will own more than 50% of it. They'll own at least 51% of your business. So why would you want to go and do business in China? Now, obviously, they have the second largest market in the world now behind India. So it is a huge market to get into, but you would allow them to own more than 50% of your business. They would be your partner. You have to have them, the Chinese Communist Party, as your partner. And with them as having controlling interest, they control and have influence over the company, do they not? Look at companies like Apple. Look at even Facebook in China doing business there.
Yeah,
Microsoft.
Well, let's talk about the tariffs then, because China just kind of commented publicly, officials there saying that Trump was essentially bullying other countries with these tariffs. So, I mean, this has been a back and forth. You know, Trump has called it, these unfair trade deals. What is the latest on the back and forth with the tariffs?
Well, the back and forth with the tariffs is this. China is much more reliant on the U.S. market because we buy about 1/3 or 3 times, I should say, 3 times as many products from China as they do from us. So I think the trade is maybe about $400 billion a year that the U.S. Actually purchases from China. That would be their imports into the U.S. And U.S. going the other way is about 1/3 of that. It's maybe 150, I think $130 billion worth. So it hurts them much more when you raise the tariffs. Now, what Trump is saying is it's time to level the playing field. You guys have these hefty tariffs on us, and we're only charging you maybe 10, 20% at the most. We're going to raise it. We're raising, it's a poker game, Dan. It's like you're playing poker and it says, okay, I'll raise you 25%. Okay, well, I'm going to raise you another 25%. And if you respond to that, I'm raising you. And that's where we're at right now, because Trump said anyone he's raising around the world, and he's sending letters out. I think he sent out 14 of them to places like Japan and countries like South Korea, Japan. He's saying, look, we're putting a 25% tariff on you. And if you increase ours, we're going to hit you with another 25%. So China is one of the biggest violators of charging us, the U.S., hefty tariffs. But Canada, our largest trading partner, they're number one. trading partner in the world. Number 2 is Mexico. U.S. Trading partner number 3 would be China. So Canada is even worse with dairy product tariffs of 250% or something like that. So Trump is saying, look, we're going to even the playing field. And that's what he's doing with China. China's kicking back because they're close to $500 billion a year sending products to the U.S. So they don't want to have those tariffs on those products.
All right, Gary, I know you covered a lot of this even more in depth on the latest episode of Global Lane here. Can you just talk about a little bit what else you have coming up on this week's episode?
Well, that was a very good interview with Gordon Chang, and I would recommend that people watch that. They'll learn quite a bit from Gordon. He's a good guest. I've known Gordon for many years, but the lead segment that we have is with Chris Mitchell, and we're talking about how we're on the cusp of monumental change in the Middle East. We're seeing 5 sheikhs in the largest city in the West Bank called Hebron, ancient city, by the way, where Abraham and Sarah are buried. 5 Muslim Palestinian sheikhs from Hebron are saying, we don't want to be part of the Palestinian Authority anymore. We want to reach a deal with Israel. We want to become part of the Abraham Accords. And they sent a letter to the economics minister of Israel saying they wanted to do that. So they're coming on board. Well, other Palestinian leaders and sheikhs in the Palestinian areas, or even Arab leaders in Arab countries around the Middle East, join in. We're seeing there's a lot of movement in that area. I think the next one we're going to see possibly next week, there's more talks, I think, with the new Syrian president, al-Shara. So we're going to have that also on the Global Lane, talking about Iran. There's a guest that we have that is a Young Voices commentator, a fellow with Young Voices. His name is Abdullah Hayek. And Abdullah Hayek is talking about Iran and how is Iran going to respond if possible nuclear talks, we still don't know that they're certain. They may be scheduled for next week, but that doesn't mean they're going to happen. If they go south, what will happen there? He talks about the possibility of Iran mining the Strait of Hormuz, which is a very strategic waterway, a choke point for shipping. And if that happens, oil prices will go through the roof. I don't know that Iran would do that because they're dependent on oil, but if they're trying to get their way and cause disruption, we're already seeing the Houthis this week made more attacks on ships. They're a proxy of the Iranian government. So we'll see what happens. Anyway, he's on. He'll be talking about that in addition to Gordon Chang. So tune in. Thank you, Dan, for asking about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I wanted to mention to everyone watching here as well, this is unrelated to China and everything we just talked about here, but I wanted to mention this before we go. The Texas floods have obviously that has dominated headlines this week, and we see the tragedy that has unfolded there in Texas since July 4th there with the flash floods and the damage we know there. Well, Operation Blessing, we have been on the ground there helping, and Operation Blessing, if you're not familiar, do amazing work with disaster relief, and they're everywhere, all over the globe, and they're there helping people right now in need who've either lost everything, lost loved ones, they need prayer, they need clean water, whatever it is that they need. That is what Operation Blessing is doing, and so we have a fundraiser attached to this video. If you feel led, please do contribute to Operation Blessing. YouTube does not take anything from that. All of that money that you donate will go right to Operation Blessing, which is going right to people on the ground there helping. So
Dan, let me say something about Operation Blessing, because I've had the privilege over the years to travel to about 120 countries. And whenever disaster hits, Operation Blessing, if they can get in there, some governments don't allow nonprofits coming in to help. But generally, when disaster hits, no matter where it is, those governments will say, sure, we'll take all the help we can get. And I've seen them around the world helping people in crisis, in disaster. And, everything from the tsunami in Indonesia. Remember when that hit Indonesia and parts of Thailand and India? Operation Blessing was there. Floods in India and Pakistan. Operation Blessing has been there throughout the Middle East. Wherever it may be, when disaster hits, and especially right here at home, because they have volunteers all over the country that come into action They have warehouses where they have supplies and they can move quickly, whether it be a hurricane in Florida or a flood in Texas. And they go out and they help immediately to demonstrate the love of Christ. Christ
Yeah.
calls us to do that. And they're responding in that way to not only bring food and help in that way, but also to help people rebuild their lives spiritually and materially.
Yeah. And amen to all that. And I'll just add too, when you say they're bringing, they bring the gospel with them. They pray with people. They are, this is not just like, we're going to give you some material things, which is good. They definitely address the spiritual as well. They're praying with people. They are sharing the love of Christ openly. And that's just a phenomenal thing about what Operation Blessing does. So yeah. And as Ruth there pointed out, President Trump is in Texas today. He is touring that. And they're, I think, even looking at more sort of flash flood warnings coming up for this weekend. I heard that potential report, so we need to be praying for all of them there. But in the meantime, Gary,
Pray
thanks.
for good weather.
Yeah.
Pray for good weather.
Yeah, absolutely.
Without the rain, sunshine, and so the waters can recede and people can get into action and start rebuilding.